Hello, welcome to episode 13 of the Lester Kitching show. Today we are talking about something that I saw online. It was as an article by the Daily Mail, and it was talking about a study that had linked eggs to a high increase in the risk of developing heart conditions and having a stroke. So obviously this is something that is very prevalent in mainstream media. It's very clickbaity, and I thought it was an important topic to talk about because there's loads and loads of articles that you'll see like this, and it can have a big impact on your ability to lose weight and keep it off and feel like you can actually eat food without feeling like you're at the risk of some serious health condition or feeling guilty for having it. So so let's dive straight into that one. So actually looking at the study, so I won't go into it too much detail in terms of like what the actual depth of the study is, because it was very clear from the outgoing that it was not the best study, and it was a very big stretch from the Daily Mail in this instance to turn quite a balanced overview from what the researchers said into something that would generate lots of attention, lots of clicks. So probably actually starting there is that's what the media's job is to do. It's not necessarily to give you the best information, it's to get you to click on their articles, scroll down their online news articles and look at all those ads and generate ad revenue for the media, whether that's a news article, whether that's radio, whether that's the newspapers, whatever it is. Ultimately, that's the business. It's to generate ad revenue, and to do that is, yes, there's an element of, I'm sure there's good journalists and good stuff out there, but there's also certainly lots of others at the other end of the scale which are less so. So looking at the study in brief, it was very much looking at and something that will happen a lot in these types of studies. So it's kind of one study. It's not looking at a whole body of research. So it's taking a snapshot and then trying to expand it across a big broad population and saying that this is applicable to everyone, and it's been a very well researched topic, which it wasn't, and it was something that was quite vague. And also it highlighted another important thing is whenever you see in things say like eggs related to people having a stroke, then there's two things that we want to be trying to consider without going into too much detail. But one, there's correlation, which means that when eggs are consumed more, there can also be a correlation with people having more strokes. But then that doesn't necessarily mean causation. So that doesn't mean that because people ate more eggs, that they were more likely to have a stroke. And that's really where the article fails to kind of go into. And if you look into the study, it kind of fails to talk about that. It doesn't read, it identifies that it's not a clear pathway between the two. It was more saying that in eggs there's a certain chemical, a certain compound within eggs, and then there was probably 3 leaps before it got to an increased risk of a stroke. And a good example for this is kind of how the study was so at a stretch, was that everyone in the study was already very sick enough to be having cardiac procedures. So they were already having serious heart health complications. So therefore, everyone in the study probably isn't a good barometer of whether of the general population, maybe me or you, aren't going to be able to really infer too much from that person's perspective, because everyone had serious heart conditions already. And also as well, the kind of the second step to the findings were they tested out this compound and increased it, and gave extremely high doses in mice, which is another thing that often happens quite a lot. So it can either be done in petri dishes. Do you know what I mean? It's not actual living organisms, or well, I suppose it's living organisms, but it's not actual animals or humans, or it might be in things like mice, which aren't directly obviously necessarily transferable. What happens in mice with extremely high doses isn't transferable to what happens in humans at a reasonable dose. So another example of this is definitely for artificial sweeteners that you see in sugar-free soft drinks. A lot of times the studies show that these things in soft drinks may have an impact on certain things, talking about gut microbes and all that kind of stuff. But actually, when you look at the studies, it's often done in, let's say, in mice, and it's in like ridiculously high doses. Do you mean you'd have to drink like 200 liters of it a day as a human to get the same dose effect? And if we're having 200 liters of anything a day, then we're obviously not going to be doing too well off the back of that. So there's always that caveat with these kind of studies, and it's not necessarily the study or the research them itself. If you actually look at the article, and I'm definitely not the expert at reading academic research, but I can have a decent look at it, and I can at least have a good understanding, form my own opinion of it. But the offer's in there, and it always is the case that they'll be quite conservative and quite on the fence with it. They won't jump to these massive conclusions. And in it, I think they said it's something worth investigating further. It's a sign that something might be there, but we need to do much more research before we can make any kind of broader implications because of this thing. Whereas obviously the Daily Mail have seen that and turned that into eggs cause strokes. And again, that's what happens with the mainstream media. So on the article, it's just another one of these. It's a single study, it's blown way out of proportion, and it doesn't really translate to real life. So the probably the better part of it, that as I was looking through this, was looking at the comments, because first of all, looking at the reactions of it, the thumbs up, the laughs, the hearts, the whatever it might be, the other emojis it may be. Do you mean there's like 8,500 laugh emojis and like 200 like emojis? So people are obviously realizing that these type of articles are just clickbait, attention seeking, and just designed to get you to read and scroll. And there's very little actual genuine value in them because it's just so extreme. And I think hopefully people are starting to wake up to that now. But there's definitely some of the things in the comments that were worth talking about. So there's a few comments, and I'll kind of read some of them out just to give you some context. But we had kind of a group of people who were kind of saying, oh, well, eggs work for me. Like, I'm fine. I eat loads of eggs and I'm fine. So eggs are fine. So we had a couple of persons saying over 1,000 likes, 6 a day eggs for 30 years, perfect blood work here. They had someone else saying, just do the opposite of whatever these articles tell you and you'll generally be correct. So again, eating loads of eggs. We had someone, me and my partner eat 60 eggs a week between the two of us and never felt healthier. And you've got lots of people who are in that category of saying, I eat loads of eggs and I'm fine. And that probably comes to a broader topic of, that could often be the case when you're talking about anything health, especially health and fitness, is people will look at things and say, well, it worked for me, so it should work for everyone. And that isn't the case. So maybe taking it away from are eggs healthy or not, but just in general, people do have different circumstances, and just because something worked for you doesn't mean it's going to work for other people, and also vice versa as well. So when you're looking at other people's success and they've started doing cycling, and that's something that's really helped them improve their health and fitness, then you can kind of look at that and think, okay, this is something that's worked for this person, and it might be someone you know, or a friend, or a colleague, or whatever it may be, and you might think, okay, well, it should work for me. And we just want to kind of bear that in mind, as that might not necessarily be the case. There's lots of other things that impact how you can execute someone else's plan. And sometimes it's genetics. A lot of times it's more just lifestyle and preferences that are going to dictate whether you can follow someone else's plan that worked for them. So, do you mean the cycling example? Let's just say that helps someone lose 10 stone by just cycling more than they used to, and making that a big part of their lifestyle. But if you don't really enjoy that, if you don't have the time to be getting out on the bike, I mean, an hour a day and then big long bike rides on a weekend, then that isn't going to work for you. So whenever we hear someone's success with something, we always want to be aware that, okay, and we almost just want to be curious with it. So this worked for that person. Can I bring any of that? Can I take any of what they've done and bring it into my world and test it out and see whether it lands for me, see whether it feels something that's quick, see whether it feels something that's easy, see whether it's something that I enjoy or that I can stick to, and be curious with that and see whether that works for you. Because if it does, then amazing, you've got the results. And if it doesn't, then we don't want to be too disheartened and think, oh, well, I'm the problem. It's just that it was a case of, hey, doing that didn't work for me. So you've got these people here saying, oh, do you mean 60 eggs a day or whatever, 60 eggs a week or whatever it is. And doing great, that works for them. But some people might look at that and think, oh, well, maybe I should eat more eggs. But then they really don't like eggs. Like, just personally, like eggs would be an amazing kind of breakfast, kind of typically in our culture, typically like a breakfast meal. But do you mean eggs? I just find quite hard to enjoy. Sometimes I fancy, but most of the times I don't. So if I can feel, but they are an amazing food, I would say. And it could be easy to say, oh, do you mean I should be having eggs in the morning because I know they're really good for me, and I would say that they generally are very, very good for a lot of people. But if you're someone who just doesn't enjoy them, if you don't like the egginess, or you don't have the time to make them, or you don't feel hungry in the morning, then you don't need to. Like, we can take that pressure off. It doesn't need to be something that we have to beat ourselves with a stick with just because someone else found success in something and it doesn't quite work for them. So that would be the first one in that kind of bucket of people that you're always going to see whenever something comes up, whether it's this diet, or talking about this diet or this exercise thing. It's always going to be, or you'll have people in the comments say, oh, well, this worked for me, so it should work for you. And there's also on the flip side of that as well, it's, oh, this didn't work for me, so it's total nonsense, when actually, do you mean, it might just not work for them, and neither one. The next other kind of thread with that was going to be kind of just how much mistrust there is in the media, and also maybe just the studies and the funding and big pharma and big food companies. And there's lots of stuff that talked about there. So there's one that this message brought to you by Pfizer, independent study from the people who make Pop-Tarts. General Mills and Kellogg's did a study, got it. So again, in the terms of thinking of a breakfast study, there's an element of, okay, well, who stands to gain if breakfast take a bashing? So you would argue that it's the breakfast cereal companies would be the ones who benefit from that. You would argue that if eggs are apparently something really healthy for you, then pharmaceutical companies will benefit from you not eating them because they want you to be sick and relying on their pills and medication to make the money. And there's obviously that could be a way that you could think about it. But there's always those in the comments as well. And that again shows, if we look kind of deeper into that shows like a big mistrust with the media itself. Then also you've got the pharmaceutical companies when we're talking about health and fitness. And then you've also got the food companies that, again, are these big, do you mean, I don't know, are they $1 trillion companies? I don't know, they're probably not far off. $1 trillion companies, Kellogg's and all these other big companies. Are they these evil businesses that are trying to rule our lives by giving us this terrible food that's really tasty but actually purposefully bad for us and keeps us hooked? Or they're just a business that makes something that people enjoy, and their goal of the business is to generate money for the shareholders and making things that people like to eat and giving people the opportunity to buy them? Is that a bad thing? Is that just what the nature of a business is? So again, it depends which way you want to look at it, and I'm not going to go into whether it's the conspiracy theory or not, but ultimately you'll always have that, and that comes from that mistrust that is definitely there. And that can also breed into the next one, which is going to be the someone else had mentioned another one, which gives us a good idea of someone who put eggs bad, eggs good, now eggs are bad again. And that feeds into that early one about that mistrust. Is you end up with people who are just like, I think it was Barbara who said it was in there, and they got loads of likes, and it just showed that people just don't know where to go. So you've got, I mean, probably 100 articles if you looked that said eggs are bad for you. Then you've got 100 articles saying that eggs are great for you and the things that you should be having more of. And then within the comments of all those articles, you have, again, people in very much opposite ends of the scale, opposite end of the spectrum in terms of what their beliefs are, and they're trying to push their beliefs onto you, or not necessarily trying to push their beliefs onto you, but they're very strong with their beliefs. And that can mean that if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you don't know what to do, then it's really, really hard for you to know what to do. And especially if we're thinking about our nutrition, like, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to eat something, but then, do you mean, we have to e we think, oh well, eggs are okay for us, but then it's, oh well, actually, are they? So then I can't have eggs, and then I think, oh well, I'll have some cereal or some porridge. Oh, but then carbs should be, as carbs are something that's going to affect my insulin and my blood sugar levels. And I mean, should I be having them at all? Should I be having low carb? Are carbs the reason that I have lots of inflammation? Then you might think, okay, well, maybe I'll just skip breakfast at all. Okay, if you've got a fasting crew who love that, then you've got another crew say fasting's not really good for you. I mean, there's definitely buckets of people that it works better for than others. So then you fall into, okay, well, if I can't eat eggs, I can't eat cereal, I can't eat porridge, I can't eat I can't eat meal replacement shakes because they're bad for me. I can't fast because of this, but then also I shouldn't be eating too many meals a day because of this. Then no wonder that people just think hit the F it button and just give up entirely, because you just feel like you just can't win. And that's the same with exercise as well. And that's when, although I am a very big advocate of weight training, for not just for fat loss, but also for improving our shape and tone, but also our ability to be strong and healthy and active when we're in our 40s, 50s and beyond, I always try my best to not criticize the other end of that scale for the people who just don't like weights and who want to play golf 3 times a week, or they do want to go on the bike and they want to go out on the bike on North Yorkshire Moors for 6 hours on a weekend. And I try or just go to aqua aerobics or whatever it may be. Although I try to be a strong advocate for weight training, I also try not to deter people from doing the thing that works for them, because ultimately I understand, and I've been in that place myself where I've been so overwhelmed with such conflicting information that it's hard to know where to turn, and it's difficult to work towards a goal of being healthier and fitter and in better shape when you have no idea what to do, because you are so confused, you are so overwhelmed. And the comment was just such a perfect one for this type of article, because there's going to be people who are in the eggs are great camp and eggs are terrible camp, and then you've got a lot of people in the middle who just don't know. And those people who don't know are the ones who are probably feeling the most stuck. They're feeling overwhelmed and they just can't make progress, because anything they do start, they're filled with doubt even on day one. They start whatever the diet is, and then as soon as they start that, as soon as they're having each meal they're taking in is something that they're doubting whether they should be having something different instead, or whether actually this meal is going to be bad for them. And this the same goes for exercise, and that the same goes for loads of things, to be honest. With just the way that any kind of research is kind of extrapolated into the most extreme version of what it could be, and taken out of as much context as possible just to generate clicks and attention. And I think that is probably the biggest one that stood out for me in terms of this article. So in terms of what's the practical takeaway for you, so if specifically for this article about eggs, the article actually, if you actually read it a little bit more beyond the headline, it kind of highlights that, I mean, it's more research is needed. And then if you read the article itself, the study itself, even if you just shove it in ChatGPT or whatever, it gives you a good overview of, well, it was kind of a very weak link, and then it's also multiple times removed from actually being causation. It's more, this thing is in eggs, which is linked to this, which then is also linked to this, which then can be correlated with this in this particular group of people who are already having serious heart health complications. And then the kind of the follow-up study, almost the second part of the study, was done in mice at extremely high doses. And again, the relevance to a human at this point is just so far removed that it's almost invaluable. It's almost useless really at that point. So really, eggs would be in the category of, just like most foods, in fact all foods, it's fine. It's fine in balance. And I think you could probably get away with being definitely towards the top end of the scale for eating lots and lots of eggs. Now, is there going to be, I can't imagine anyone's in terrible physical shape from a weight perspective because they were eating eggs. Because they're eating too many eggs, sorry. It might, if they're eating too many eggs, they're also probably eating lots of other stuff as well. Probably 3 bacon, 3 sausage, and two slices of fried toast on a breakfast 7 days a week. That might be the big problem when you actually look at it. But in terms of that's probably where I would go with any article that you see which talks about a specific food and really kind of demonizes it. Again, try and recognize that. What is the goal of this? The person who shared this, who's published this, is it to really genuinely help? And if it is, there should be some balance to it as well. And hopefully, if you've listened to any of these other shows that I've done, if you've seen any of my stuff on social media or read my book, I do try and give that balanced side to it as well. So it's never that one size fits all approach, because it isn't, and it never will be the case. And anyone who's trying to tell you that is either trying to sell you something, or they're just so insecure about being wrong that they have to double down and they have to attack anything that goes against that. And a really good thing, really good point actually, is to consider if you follow anyone whose kind of brand, I suppose, is built around a specific method, then be very conscious of that. So let's just say that they are the fasting king. Let's just say that's their brand, or the fasting queen, or the glucose queen, or whatever. Do you mean whatever they are? But once they've aligned their brand and their personal brand and which is ultimately their business, to a particular method, then they can't be wrong on it. They cannot be wrong. So in the face of an overwhelming amount of data which says that, okay, well, maybe it's not that big a deal, or maybe actually you're actually entirely wrong and it's not actually bad for you, it's actually good for you, then they just cannot compute. They cannot allow that to be the case, because they're going to blow up their business. If they're the fasting king, and they say to you, okay, you must fast because of X, Y, and Z, these 7 studies or whatever it is, and then 52 studies come out later which disprove the other 7 and show that the 7 were weak in comparison to the other 52, they can't go back on that, because now their entire business, their entire life is built, and their personal brand is built on the fact that fasting is the way to do it. So anyone who is tied to a method and doesn't give balance when they are sharing things, and it's difficult sharing things over a 30-second reel on Instagram, but if you look into a bit of their stuff, you should find that there is some balance to it in maybe their longer form content that they do. But ultimately, there needs to be kind of a caveat to it, because ultimately that's what real life is. Anyone who's trying to sell you, this is the thing, and it's terrible for you, or it's amazing for you, and it will work for everyone irrespective of where they're at, then they're probably telling you something to get you to buy. Because if they're certain of it and you're unsure, you're more likely to believe them. Whereas if you're unsure and someone comes at you, maybe like I do, with a bit more balanced approach and isn't as concrete on the particular method, you're less likely to be influenced by me. And I accept that is a cost of, I suppose, having integrity, for want of a better word. But ultimately, that's what you need to be looking out for. If you're seeing stuff on social media, look at there needs to be some balance to it. And often, if it's coming from, if it's a clickbait headline, then it probably is clickbait, and there's probably much more nuance to it, or it's much less serious than you think it is. And then also as well, look at is this realistic to a human? If we're talking about the quantity of certain foods, well, if it was done in mice with the equivalent of 200 liters of Coca-Cola, of Coke Zero, then that's probably not that applicable to me day to day when I have a couple of pints of Coke Zero when I go to the pub on a weekend. Probably doesn't make a difference compared to a mouse that's being pounded with 200 liters worth of Coke Zero, the equivalent of. So that would be a good way to approach these kind of things for for yourself, if you are feeling confused about diet, about exercise, and you're seeing all these clickbait headlines, you're seeing these influencers who are very strong opinions, always bear that in mind, that they might not be necessarily, whether intentionally or not, giving you the full picture, and there's always some kind of nuance to it, and usually that's where the magic is. And if you are really confused, then and it's something you've enjoyed listening to the show, then what I recommend you do is request a free copy of my book. You can get a copy at lesterkitching.com/free. The book is called Fat Loss for the Real World, and it's designed to help you with real strategies, no bullshit, no nonsense, no extremes, to get you the results that you want. So you can finally get control of your weight without having to do these crash diets, without having to ban foods, without having to do loads of workouts you hate, and without having to do things like injections or cancel your social plans. So if that's something you're interested in, get your free copy of my book, lesterkitchen.com/free, and make sure you tune in for the next episode. If you have enjoyed the episode, it'd be really great if you could subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. And also, if you can like and drop a comment, that would be really cool as well, to see who's listening. It's always nice to see and recognize that people are getting value from this. So let me know what you enjoyed, and I will see you on the next show. Thank you. Bye.